Hello, I'm Nikita Stark, Human Dynamics Specialist and Alchemy Facilitator. So today we're going to be talking about the mother wound, how it quietly shapes the self you walk around with every day. Now, before I get on with that, when you find my work, you usually find it because something in you is ready for a deeper kind of honesty. I speak to the places most people avoid. The parts of us that shape our relationships, our choices, and the way we move through the world. If you want to stay connected to this kind of exploration and begin your own inner recalibration, you can subscribe here on YouTube and join my Substack. So, here we go. The mother wound. Which mother wound do you carry? How your first bond shapes your inner voice, your choices, and your life. Our relationship with our mother is the very first model of how we relate to ourselves. It might be the chatter in your mind, whether it's kind, critical, anxious, or calm. It's often an echo of how you experienced her and how you interpreted her presence or absence. If she soothed you, you may have had an inner voice that feels safe. If she shamed you, you may carry an inner critic that never switches off. If she was inconsistent, your nervous system will still be wired for uncertainty. This doesn't mean if you're riddled with anxiety, it's all your mum's fault. Mums, like all humans, are shaped by their own wounds. But I want to touch on this because so many of my clients have had light bulb moments when they finally name what they're feeling. When they realize that their mother wound isn't just a theory, it's a blueprint running through their adult life, their choices, their relationships, even how they treat themselves. Why naming the mother wound matters. You can't heal what you can't name. For many people, the feelings they carry might be anxiety, shame, guilt, emptiness, don't seem to have an origin. They assume it's just how they are. But once you begin to see the thread back to childhood, the pieces fall into place. When you name the mother wound, it doesn't mean you need to blame your mum, although you certainly can if that serves you. You're recognizing the way your child's self interpreted her presence, or her absence, her words, or her silence. That interpretation became the template for how you speak to yourself, how you handle conflict, how you show up in relationships, and what you believe you deserve. Without that awareness, you stay stuck in loops. You keep attracting the same dynamics, repeating the same arguments, feeling the same emptiness, and wondering why sod all changes. Naming the wound brings light to the pattern. It doesn't fix it instantly, but it opens a door to choice. And choice is where healing begins. The many faces of the mother wound. What I'm about to share isn't gospel list or anything, it's an outline. Everyone's different. Two people can grow up in the same home and carry very different wounds. Because what matters is not particularly what just happened, but how you responded to it. Your nervous system, your temperament, your interpretation, these are what shape the imprint. With that said, there are patterns that come up again and again. I see them in my clients, I see them in myself, and you'll probably recognize some of them in your own story. Naming these archetypes doesn't mean you'll fit neatly into just that little box. You might recognize pieces or several. That's normal. The point isn't to label you, but to help you understand how early dynamics with your mother may still be echoing in your adult life. So let's walk through some of the most common mother wound archetypes and how they show up in childhood, how they echo in adulthood, and the core wound that ties them all together. But before we do, I think it's really important to see why the same wound can create such different outcomes. Children adapt differently to the same pain. One may tune up their sensitivity, becoming hyper-aware of every shift in mood, scanning constantly to stay safe. That's the empath pathway. Reading others before they explode. Another may tune tuned down their sensitivity, shutting off their own emotions to survive. That's the sociopath pathway, disconnecting from care because caring was too painful. If you've ever wondered why siblings can grow up in the same house with the same mum and yet turn out so different, that is why. One carries the wound by feeling everything, the other carries the wound by feeling nothing. Both are survival strategies. Both come from the same soil. That's why under each archetype, I'll show you how the wound can split so you can see that whether you tuned into someone who feels everything or someone who switched it off, the root is the same. So let's start with the absent mother. What it looked like as a child. Your mum may have been physically gone, working long hours, lost in addiction, or walking out altogether. Or she may have been there in body but not in presence. She might be distracted by her own struggles, mental health, or relationships. You might remember sitting alone in your room, waiting for her to notice you, or you might not remember at all, maybe just feel an emptiness or a sense of being unseen. Here are some core wounds that it can form. I'm not enough, or I'm too much. If your blueprint was to blame yourself, you may have decided you weren't interesting, you weren't clever or lovable enough to hold her attention. Or if you were shamed or told you were needy, you may have internalized that your emotions pushed her away. The next wound is rejection. If she left or dismissed you, your wound may feel like proof that people will always choose something else over you. Then there's abandonment. If she was gone for long periods, you may carry a fear that love always leaves. Love is conditional and frequently withdrawn. Now, how does this show up as an adult? You might be attracted to unavailable partners, chasing people who can't meet you. You might be overworking, proving yourself again and again, but never feeling secure. You might be feeling invisible in friendships, in groups or workplaces, and you may be struggling with deep loneliness even when you're surrounded by people. So how can it split? Empath or sociopath? Remember, both are paths or paths. Empath, they become hyper-attuned, scanning for presence, desperate to feel connection. Sociopath, switch off their needs entirely, deciding connection is pointless and unsafe. Next, we're going to look at the smothering mother. So what does that look like as a child? Your mum may have been over-involved in every part of your life, deciding what you wore, who you played with, how you felt, even what you thought. She might have struggled to separate her identity from yours, leaning on you for emotional support or keeping you so close you never had space to breathe. You might remember being praised when you did what she wanted, but guilt-tripped or punished when you tried to assert yourself. So here are the core wounds it can form. I'm not enough, or I'm too much. You may have felt like you could never quite please her, that you had to shrink or bend yourself to keep her calm, or you may have felt that your independence, your anger, or even your joy was too much for her to handle. Then there's the loss of self. If her moods or needs dictated every move, you may have learned that your own desires weren't safe to express. And then rejection. If she withdrew affection when you didn't comply, you may have carried the belief that love disappears the moment you stand in your own truth. Now, how does this show up in adulthood? Well, you may find it very difficult setting boundaries without guilt. You may have a fear of intimacy. You crave closeness but feel suffocated when it finally arrives. People pleasing and self-abandonment in relationships. A constant sense of responsibility for others, their emotions, often attracting controlling or needy partners. Struggling to know what you want because your focus is always on everyone else. And how it can split: empath or sociopath. Empath overfunctions, people pleasing, they lose boundaries to keep others comfortable. Sociopath, rebelling, pushing people away, rejecting closeness because you find it suffocating. Now let's move on to the critical mother. What it looks like as a child. Your mum may have been very quick to point out flaws, your appearance, your grades, your behaviour, Maybe nothing you did was ever quite right, and praise was rare or short-lived. You might remember the sting of comparison to other siblings, or the sense that her love came with conditions. Even small mistakes could feel like a big deal. So it wasn't safe to make a mistake, leaving you braced for criticism constantly. Core wounds, it can form, I'm not enough. If you internalized her words, you may have believed that who you are at your core isn't good enough. Then there's I'm too much. If you were told you were dramatic, sensitive, or overreacting, you may have learnt to suppress your feelings. Then you've got rejection. Criticism can feel like rejection in a child's body, creating the belief that love will always be pulled away if you don't perform perfectly. Shame. You may have absorbed a deep sense of being flawed, broken, or unworthy. Now, how does this one show up as an adult? Well, you'll feel a harsh inner critic that echoes your mum's voice, undermining your achievements. You may feel perfectionism, working tirelessly to earn approval, but never actually feeling satisfied. You may have a fear of failure, which can cause you to procrastinate or completely paralyze you. And sensitivity to feedback. So hearing rejection, even when there was none intended. Collapsing under pressure or avoiding opportunities because you fear being found out or exposed. How it can split. Empath or sociopath. Empath. Lives to please. Perfect. And they anticipate criticism before it lands. Sociopath. Shuts off care, dismisses feedback, attacks first to avoid being shamed. Now let's move on to the narcissistic mother. What this looked like as a child. Your mum may have made everything about her moods, her needs, her image. Sometimes she may have been charming and charismatic. That's in public though. But at home, she left little space for your feelings. She may have sought validation through you, parading your achievements as her own while ignoring your struggles, or she might have dismissed, mocked, or competed with you, especially if your light threatened to outshine hers. Now, this is important to say. Narcissism isn't one thing. It shows up in different ways. So, you've got grandiose narcissism. That's loud, obvious, critical, demanding. She might have been the center of attention, expecting you to orbit her needs. Then you've got vulnerable narcissism. That's a little bit more subtle. Fragile, victim-like. She might have guilt-tripped you, used tears or illness to keep control, or made you feel responsible for her suffering. Then you've got the covert narcissist. Polished and sweet on the outside, but manipulative underneath. Praise in public, digs in private, leaving you confused about what was real. Communal narcissism, and that's playing the selfless helper role, may be known as the perfect mother to everyone else while neglecting your emotional world at home. Now, in the interest of being vulnerable, my mother displayed characteristics from the bottom two categories, which is covert narcissism and communal narcissism. Core wounds that can form. I'm not enough. If her love was conditional on you boosting her ego, you may have believed you had to perform or shrink yourself to be acceptable. I'm too much. If your achievements or emotions threatened her, you may have been made to feel guilty for shining. Unseen. Your needs may have been ignored completely, leaving you with the belief that your feelings don't matter. Then you've got rejection. If she withdrew or punished you for asserting yourself, it may have wired the belief that authenticity leads to loss of love. Now, how does this show up as an adult? Well, you'll be attracting narcissistic or emotionally unavailable partners, so you can replay the same dynamic. Performing or people-pleasing in relationships, terrified of being abandoned. Struggling to know who you are because you learn to mold yourself around others. Feeling guilty or unsafe when you shine, succeed, or step into your truth. Overfunctioning in groups, friendships, or family while you secretly feel empty or unseen. How it can split. Empath or sociopath. Empath becomes a mirror for others. Overly responsible, reads every mood. Sociopath imitates narcissism, adopting entitlement or manipulation to survive. Now let's look at the inconsistent mother. What it looked like as a child. Your mum may have been warm and loving one day, cold or unavailable the next. Sometimes she was playful and attentive. Other times she was withdrawn, angry or distracted. You never knew which version you were going to get. As a child, that unpredictably can feel like walking on eggshells, constantly scanning the room to decide if it was safe to be yourself. Core wounds that it can form. Rejection. If her sudden withdrawal felt personal, you may have believed you weren't lovable enough to keep her attention. Then you've got abandonment. If she came close, then pulled away, your nervous system may have been wired to expect love to vanish without warning. I'm too much. If she snapped or shamed you when you expressed your needs, you may have decided your feelings were the problem. I'm not enough. If she seemed uninterested in you, you may have concluded that nothing you could do could secure her love. So how does this show up as an adult? Well, you'll have anxiety in relationships, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, overanalyzing text, tone or silences, convinced disconnection is coming. Attracted to partners who blow hot and cold, replaying the unpredictability, feeling addicted to that push-pull dynamic because they feel like home. It's very familiar. Difficulty trusting stability. Peace feels boring or suspicious. How can it split? Empath or sociopath? Empath overreads every detail, anxiously waiting for the next shift. Sociopath detaches, refuses reliance on anyone, closes off emotionally. Now let's move on to the distant mother. What it looked like as a child. Your mum may have been present in body. She may have cooked meals, keeping the house running, but emotionally completely closed off. Maybe she didn't know how to comfort you when you cried, or she brushed off your feelings with "don't be silly" or "you'll be fine." She might have valued achievement and discipline over affection, or simply been so overwhelmed by her own life that warmth felt unavailable. Core wounds that it can form. Well, neglect. You may have felt invisible in your own home, as though your feelings weren't worth noticing. I'm not enough. If your achievements were met with silence or indifference, you may have concluded that you could never measure up. I'm too much. If your emotions were dismissed or mocked, you may have learned that your sensitivity was a burden. Then there's rejection. Emotional distance can feel like rejection to a child's nervous system, wiring you to expect disconnection. And then how it shows up in adulthood. Avoiding intimacy or finding it hard to trust emotional closeness. Over-relying on logic and achievement while ignoring your inner world. Struggling to identify or express your feelings even to yourself. Keeping relationship surface level to avoid the risk of vulnerability. Attracting partners who are emotionally unavailable, replaying the same dynamic. The split, empath or sociopath. Empath craves closeness, clings to others, overgives to feel wanted. Sociopath decides closeness is dangerous or pointless, stays cold and aloof. Next we go to the martyr mother. What did this look like as a child? So, your mum may have carried an air of suffering, sighing heavily, making sacrifices, and letting you know how hard things were. You might remember hearing, "After everything I've done for you," or feeling like your needs were an added burden on her already heavy load. She may not have said it outright, but you sense that your existence cost her something. Now, core wounds that can form. Shame. If your needs were met with sighs or guilt, you may have believed you were a problem simply for existing. I'm not enough. If nothing you did lightened her suffering, you may have internalized that you couldn't make people happy. I'm too much. If your requests triggered her exhaustion, you may have decided your needs overwhelm others. Rejection. If she pulled away emotionally, you may have felt love is earned through suffering. Now, how does this show up in adulthood? Suppressing your joy, believing it's selfish to shine when others are struggling, over-caring for others while neglecting yourself, attracting partners who play the victim or rely on you to carry the load. Feeling guilty when you rest or ask for what you need. Difficulty receiving love without feeling you owe something back. How it can split, empath or sociopath. Empaths, they over-identify with others' suffering. They carry guilt that isn't theirs. Sociopaths resent others and their needs. They reject responsibility and refuse to care. Next, we have the enmeshed mother and what this looks like as a child. Your mum may have blurred the line between her feelings and yours. Maybe you were her confidant, her little best friend, or the one she leaned on when life got hard. You might remember her oversharing adult problems, making you responsible for her moods, or expecting you to comfort her instead of the other way around. You weren't allowed to fully separate. You existed as an extension of her. Now, core wounds that can form. Loss of self. You may have learned that your identity doesn't belong to you, but to whoever needs you most. Guilt. If you try to pull away, you may have been shamed for being selfish. I'm not enough. If her unhappiness never lifted, you may have believed you weren't capable of making her happy. And then you've got abandonment. If you attempted independence, she may have withdrawn love, wiring you to believe closeness and freedom can't coexist. Now, how does that show up as an adult? Weak or porous boundaries, struggling to say no. A constant pull to take responsibility for others' emotions, fear of independence or guilt when you prioritize yourself, attracting emotionally dependent partners or friendships. Confusion around who you are when you're not caring for someone else. How it can split. Empath, sociopath. Empath becomes boundaryless. They feel guilty for having their own self. Sociopaths cut ties harshly. They reject dependency. Self-protects through detachment. Let's move on to the competitive mother, what this looks like as a child. Your mum may have compared herself to you or even competed with you. If you were praised for your looks, intelligence or talents, she might have felt threatened or belittled your achievements. You may remember her making sly comments, dressing more glamorously than you on special occasions, or criticizing you when you shone too brightly. Instead of celebrating you, she treated you like a rival. Now, core wounds that can form. I'm too much. If she cut you down for shining, you may have learnt to dim yourself so others wouldn't feel threatened. I'm not enough. If she constantly outdid or dismissed you, you may have felt you could never measure up. Rejection. Love felt conditionally safe when you're outshining her. And then there's shame. You may have internalized the belief that standing out or being beautiful is completely unsafe. How it shows up as an adult. So you could be sabotaging your own success, afraid of jealousy or backlash, struggling to celebrate your achievements or your own gifts, feeling unsafe around other women, expecting competition or criticism, or dimming your light in relationships, work or friendships. And also attracting people who resent your growth instead of supporting it. How it can split. Empath, sociopath. Empaths. Makes them shrink, makes them feel small, avoid success to keep peace. Sociopath competes ruthlessly, repeats the same dominance pattern as their mother. Now we've got the role reversal mother. What it looked like as a child. Your mum may have leaned on you as if you were the parent. You might remember being the one who comforted her when she was upset, looking after siblings, or even managed household tasks that weren't yours to carry. Instead of her being your safe base, you became hers. Childhood responsibility felt really heavy, and your own needs were often unmet. Core wounds that it can form. Overburdened. You may believe love means carrying others' weight. I'm not enough. No matter how much you did, it was never enough to fix her problems. Abandonment. Your own needs were neglected, worrying you to believe no one will care for you. Then you've got loss of self. If you were praised for being so mature, you may have lost touch with your childlike joy. How it shows up as an adult. Overfunctioning in relationships, jobs, or family roles. Attracting partners you end up parenting or rescuing. Struggling to rest, play, or feel safe receiving care. Feeling guilty when you prioritize your own needs. And burnout from carrying responsibility that isn't yours. How it can split. Empath or sociopath. Empaths. Overgivers, takes care of everyone, repeats parent role in adult life. Sociopath, refuses care, distances responsibility, and avoids emotional labour. And finally, we've got the traumatised mother. What that looks like as a child. Your mum may have been so consumed by her own pain that she couldn't fully see you. She might have been grieving, depressed, anxious, or stuck in an abusive relationship. You may remember tiptoeing around her moods, feeling like you had to be good so she wouldn't break. Sometimes she might have lashed out. Other times she may have collapsed, leaving you feeling unsafe or unsure how to connect. Core wounds that it can form. Fear. Growing up in her instability may have wired you to believe the world is really dangerous. I'm not enough. If she couldn't get well or happy, you may have thought it was your fault. I'm too much. If your needs triggered her distress, you may have learnt to suppress them entirely. Abandonment. If she disappeared into her pain, you may have felt emotionally or physically deserted. How it shows up in adulthood. So, hypervigilance, constantly scanning for danger, waiting for the next crisis, or absorbing other people's pain, often confusing their emotions with your own. Anxiety that makes rest and peace feel really unsafe. Overcaring for others at the expense of yourself. Attracting partners or friendships that mirror her instability, keeping chaos well and truly alive. How it can split. Empath or sociopath. Empath, they absorb pain, overcare, and constantly rescue others. Sociopath shut down, disconnects, refuse to feel the chaos at all. Okay, look, this isn't about blame. It's important to pause here. Naming the mother wound isn't about blaming your mum. Most mothers were doing the very best they could with the tools and awareness they had. Many of them were carrying their own unhealed wounds, repeating what was done to them without even realising it. What matters is not necessarily the list of what she did or didn't do, but it's how you respond to it as a child. Now, that response became your blueprint. So if she was inconsistent, you may have learnt to scan for danger. If she was critical, you might have learnt to perform for approval. If she was distant, you might have learnt to shut down. That doesn't mean you can't get angry. You can. You can rage, judge, or blame it if that's where you're at right now. If that's what serves you in this part of your journey, it's bloody valid. I personally dislike this spiritual bypassing shit that runs through the healing community. The idea that everyone must be forgiven straight away. Forgiveness can be deeply liberating, but it's not a requirement and it's not something you force. And true forgiveness happens in its own time, and it's something you do for yourself, not the other person. But you only reach that point by moving through the stages honestly. Every response has its place. Every stage of the journey matters. The point isn't to judge your mum. The point is to see the wound clearly enough that you stop running it on repeat. So how do you heal the mother wound? Well, look, awareness is the doorway. It's not the whole journey. You don't heal the mother wound by reading about it or by endlessly analysing your childhood. Healing happens in the body. It happens when you allow yourself to feel what your child self never got to feel, and when you begin to reparent those parts of you with safety, love, and consistency. I often write that labeling helps no one. I talk about this a lot. And when you grab hold of a label, you risk over identifying with it, becoming the child of a narcissistic, or a child of a narcissistic mother, or someone with abandonment wounds instead of transcending it. But naming the pattern can help because it brings that hidden blueprint into light. The key is to be mindful that the label doesn't become who you are. So whether your mother was critical, narcissistic, enmeshed, distant, or something else, remember this. She behaved that way through her own unhealed wounds. That behavior is not the truth of who she is, nor is it you. It's not your fault. It's how her pain showed up. And in the same way, the wound you carry isn't who you are either. It's a response your child self created to survive. Healing is never about wearing the wound as an identity. It's about naming it, feeling it, and then learning how to embody something beyond it. So here are the stages I see again and again in my clients. So 1, awareness, naming the wound and recognizing the blueprint you carry. 2, feeling. Actually allow the anger, the grief, the sadness, or the shame to surface instead of bypassing it. 3, reparent. Give yourself the words, the presence, and the attunement you once needed. And then finally, 4, embodiment. Shifting, not just in thought, but in your nervous system, teaching your body that safety and love are possible now. It's not a quick process, and it doesn't mean your relationship with your mum has to change for you to heal. This work is about you and reclaiming the parts of yourself that got hidden or silenced and learning how to carry them with compassion into adulthood. The mother wound is not who you are. It's an imprint. It's an emotional blueprint, a survival script, and it's what your child self created in response to the environment you grew up in. Naming it helps you see the pattern, but the real work is choosing not to keep living on that loop. So here's the truth bomb. Don't expect your mum to own up or heal you. 2 things are almost always true. 1, she likely won't unless she's doing her own inner work. 2, even if she does, it won't change the scripts already running in your life. Healing comes when you own the wound and break the pattern yourself. Sometimes the greatest act of love is healing the very wound your parents caused, because in doing so, you break the cycle. And in that breaking, you not only set yourself free, you create the possibility they might soften and heal too. That's the beauty of cycle breaking. It ripples both backwards and forwards. You don't have to bypass your anger. You don't have to rush to forgiveness. You don't have to wear the wound as your identity. Healing is about meeting yourself honestly, stage by stage, until your body learns a new response, one of safety, love, and coherence. That's when the blueprint begins to shift. So this is the work I guide people through in my alchemy sessions. I don't try and change you because there's nothing wrong with you. I help you remember who you are beneath all this noise, so you stop seeing the same film on repeat and start living a different story. If you want to learn more about the inner work and alchemy, subscribe to my YouTube, subscribe to Substack, and look in the description below where you can find several pathways to begin the healing. I hope you have a wonderful day and remember who you are.